Chidi Okafor stood in front of Sterling Heights marketing agency, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. The building was everything he had dreamed of: glass and steel reaching toward the Lagos sky, security guards in crisp uniforms, luxury cars gleaming in the parking lot. Through the revolving doors, he could see a lobby with marble floors and modern art on the walls. This was success. This was where he belonged, or at least where he wanted to belong. He looked down at his shoes. They were polished until they shined, but if you looked closely, you could see the worn leather, the places where he had carefully colored over scuffs with a marker. His suit was borrowed from his uncle, altered by his mother's skilled hands to fit his slimmer frame. The shirt was new, the only new thing he wore, purchased with money he had saved for 3 months from his previous job selling phone cards at the bus station. Chidi was 23 years old, and today was the most important day of his life. He had applied to Sterling Heights 2 months ago, sending his resume with trembling hands. When they called him for an interview, he had shouted so loud his mother came running from the kitchen, thinking something terrible had happened. Instead, she found him laughing and crying at the same time, waving his phone in the air like a trophy. Sterling Heights only hired the best. Everyone knew that. If you worked there, you had made it. The interview panel consisted of 3 people: Mr. Davidson, the silver-haired creative director who wore a watch that probably cost more than Chidi's family earned in a year; Mrs. Adeyemi, the sharp-eyed HR manager who missed nothing; and Tunda, a young account executive whose confident smile and designer clothes made Chidi feel small and shabby. "Tell us about yourself, Chidi," Mr. Davidson had said, leaning back in his leather chair. This was the moment Chidi had rehearsed 1,000 times. He had planned to tell the truth, that he grew up in Ajegunle, one of Lagos's poorest neighborhoods, that his father was a taxi driver who worked 16-hour days, that his mother sold vegetables at the market, that he had put himself through a modest polytechnic by working 3 jobs, that he was hungry, not for food, but for opportunity, for a chance to prove himself, for a life different from the one he was born into. But when he opened his mouth, looking at their expensive clothes and confident faces, the truth felt like a weight that would sink him before he even had a chance to swim. So instead, Chidi told them what he thought they wanted to hear. "I grew up in Lekki," he said, naming one of Lagos's most affluent neighborhoods. "My father is in international business, import-export. I studied at the University of Lagos." The lie rolled off his tongue smoother than he expected. "I've always been passionate about marketing. During my university years, I interned at several top firms." He watched their faces. They nodded, impressed. Mrs. Adeyemi made notes. Tunda smiled as if recognizing a kindred spirit. The lies worked like magic, opening doors that truth might have kept closed. Before we continue with what happened to Chidi, I want to ask you something important. Where are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And tell me, have you ever felt pressure to be someone you're not just to fit in? Let's talk about it. When Chidi left the interview, he felt both elated and sick. He had lied. He had lied about everything that made him who he was. But he had also seen the way they looked at him after the lies, with respect, with interest, with the promise of opportunity. Surely, he told himself, once he got the job and proved his worth through his work, the lies wouldn't matter anymore. Surely his talent would speak louder than his fabricated background. 2 weeks later, he received the call. He got the job. And with that job came a choice he didn't yet realize he was making: to continue living the lie or to come clean and risk losing everything. Chidi chose the lie. He chose it every day. With every conversation, with every fabricated story about his wealthy upbringing, he chose it, and with each choice, the truth became harder to tell and the consequences became more inevitable. Chidi's first day at Sterling Heights felt like stepping into a different world. The office was beautiful: open-plan workspace with standing desks, a cafe serving gourmet coffee, a gym on the fourth floor, even a game room where employees could take creative breaks. His new colleagues were polished, confident people who spoke casually about weekend trips to Dubai, about their second cars, about investment portfolios and property in choice neighborhoods. He was assigned to a team of 5 account executives. There was Tunde, who had interviewed him, along with Ngozi, Emeka, Kemi, and Biodun. They were all around his age, but they moved through the world differently. They had the ease of people who had never worried about money, never taken 3 buses to get somewhere because they couldn't afford a taxi, never eaten the same meal for a week because it was all the family could afford. "So, Chidi, which part of Lekki?" Ngozi asked during his first team lunch. They were at an expensive restaurant, the kind where the menu had no prices and the portions were tiny but beautifully arranged. "Phase 1, Chidi said, naming the most exclusive section. The lie came easily now. "Near the beach." "Oh, nice. We should hang out sometime. I'm in phase 2. We're practically neighbors." Ngozi's enthusiasm was genuine, which made Chidi's deception feel worse. The lunch bill came to 20,000 naira. Chidi's share was 4,000. That was more than his mother spent on groceries for a week. He paid without flinching, even though it meant he would eat Gary and ground nuts for the next few days. This was the cost of belonging, he told himself. This was an investment in his future. But the costs kept adding up. His colleagues suggested after-work drinks at trendy bars. They organized weekend outings to expensive clubs. They talked about fashion brands and expected everyone to know them. Chidi found himself spending money he didn't have, buying clothes on credit, taking loans from mobile apps with crushing interest rates. He told his parents he was saving money for his future, so he couldn't send much home. In truth, he was drowning in debt, trying to maintain an image that was bleeding him dry. The worst part was the stories. Every lie required 10 more lies to support it. When Tunda mentioned his father's company, Chidi had to invent details about his own fictional father's import-export business. When they talked about their university experiences, Chidi had to pretend he knew the University of Lagos campus, had to fabricate memories of classes and professors and campus life he had never experienced. He lived in fear that someone would visit his home in Lekki, so he always suggested meeting at their places instead. He lived in terror that someone would mention his polytechnic or ask detailed questions about Unilag that he couldn't answer. Every conversation was a minefield. Every social gathering was a performance. He was exhausted from being someone he wasn't. But there were moments when the performance felt worth it, like when Mr. Davidson praised his campaign idea in front of the whole department, like when he landed his first major client and everyone celebrated his success, like when he proved that despite his lies about his background, his talent was real. Maybe, he thought, if he worked hard enough, if he proved himself valuable enough, his fake identity would eventually become irrelevant. What Chidi didn't realize was that lies are like seeds planted in dark soil. They grow in the shadows, spreading roots that entangle everything, until one day the ground can no longer hold them and they break through the surface, destroying everything you built above them. For Chidi, that day was coming sooner than he could have imagined. 6 months into his job, Chidi had become one of Sterling Heights' rising stars. His campaigns were creative, his client relationships strong, his work ethic unquestionable. Mr. Davidson called him into his office one morning with news that made Chidi's heart soar. Chidi, we're promoting you to senior account executive. You've earned it. There's also a significant raise, and with it comes a new opportunity. We're pitching for the Zenith Corporation account next month, our biggest potential client. I want you to lead the pitch team. Chidi felt like he was floating. This was it. This was everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed for, everything he had lied for. A promotion, a raise, and the chance to lead the agency's most important pitch. He called his mother that night, and for the first time in months, he sent money home. She cried with joy, thanking God for blessing her son. But success brought new complications. The promotion meant more visibility, more scrutiny, more opportunities for his lies to unravel. It also meant more pressure to maintain his fabricated lifestyle. His colleagues threw him a celebration party at an exclusive rooftop lounge. The bill for the night was astronomical. As the guest of honor, he felt obligated to contribute more than his share. He took another loan. Then came the background check. It was routine, Mrs. Adeyemi explained. For senior positions, especially those handling major clients, the company did enhanced verification. Educational qualifications, previous employment, references, all would be confirmed. Chidi felt his world tilt. The University of Lagos would have no record of him. His prestigious internships had never existed. His father's international business was actually a taxi service. Every fabricated detail of his resume was about to be examined under a microscope. He couldn't sleep that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his small rented room in Surulere, so far from the Lekki mansion he had claimed as home. He thought about coming clean, confessing everything before they discovered it. But what would he say? How could he explain 6 months of lies? They would fire him immediately. His career would be destroyed. His family would be devastated. The shame would follow him everywhere. So Chidi did what desperate people do. He tried to manipulate the verification process. He called a friend from Polytechnic who worked in administration, begging him to confirm a Unilag degree if anyone called asking. He created fake letterheads and forged employment letters from companies that didn't know he existed. He built lie upon lie, each one more elaborate and desperate than the last. The lies were becoming a second job, requiring constant management and maintenance. He stopped sleeping properly, lost weight, became irritable and distracted. His colleagues noticed but attributed it to the stress of the upcoming Zenith pitch. They didn't know he was living a nightmare of his own creation, waiting for the inevitable moment when his house of cards would collapse. That moment came on a Tuesday morning during a team meeting about the Zenith pitch. Mrs. Adeyemi walked in with Mr. Davidson, their faces serious. "Chidi, we need to speak with you privately." And in that instant, Chidi knew. His time was up. The truth was about to come out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Mr. Davidson's office felt smaller than usual, the air thick with tension. Chidi sat across from him and Mrs. Adeyemi, his palms sweating, his heart racing. On the desk between them lay a folder, and Chidi knew without looking that it contained evidence of his deception. Chidi, Mrs. Adeyemi began, her voice professional but cold. We've completed your background verification. We've found several inconsistencies. Inconsistencies. That was a generous word for wholesale fabrication. The University of Lagos has no record of your graduation. In fact, they have no record of your enrollment. The companies you listed as previous employers have never heard of you. Your father's supposed import-export business doesn't exist in any business registry. And we spoke to your reference contacts. The numbers you provided connect to people who don't work at the companies you claimed. Each sentence was a hammer blow. Chidi felt himself shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller in his chair. Would you like to explain? Mr. Davidson asked, and there was disappointment in his voice that hurt more than anger would have. Chidi opened his mouth to lie again, to spin another story, to salvage what couldn't be salvaged. But he was so tired. Tired of pretending, tired of juggling fabrications, tired of being someone he wasn't. So instead, the truth came pouring out. I lied, he said simply, about everything. I didn't go to Unilag. I went to a polytechnic in Mushin. I graduated with a national diploma, not a degree. I didn't grow up in Lekki. I grew up in Ajegunle. My father isn't an international businessman. He drives a taxi. My mother sells vegetables at Oshodi Market. I've never had prestigious internships. Before this job, I sold phone cards at the bus station. The confession felt like bleeding out. Painful, but also strangely relieving. I lied because I was ashamed. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, that I was just a poor boy from the slums, you wouldn't see my talent. You wouldn't give me a chance. I thought if I could just get my foot in the door, if I could prove myself through my work, then my background wouldn't matter. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Silence filled the office. Mrs. Adeyemi's expression was unreadable. Mr. Davidson looked out the window, processing. Your work has been excellent, Mr. Davidson finally said. Your campaigns are creative. Your client relationship strong. You have real talent, Chidi. That's what makes this so painful. You didn't need to lie. We've hired people from all backgrounds. What we care about is capability, creativity, work ethic, all things you have in abundance. But we cannot tolerate dishonesty, Mrs. Adeyemi continued. You lied on your application. You've been lying for 6 months. How can we trust you with our clients, with our company's reputation, when you've been so thoroughly deceitful about your own identity? Chidi felt tears burning behind his eyes. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth. Finally. We're going to need time to decide how to proceed, Mr. Davidson said. For now, you're suspended pending a full review. We'll be in touch. Chidi nodded and stood on shaky legs. As he walked out of the office, he saw his colleagues through the glass walls. Tunda was staring at him with confusion. Ngozi looked concerned. They didn't know yet, but they would soon. Everyone would soon know that the polished colleague they'd accepted as one of their own was actually a fraud from the slums who had lied his way into their world. He packed his desk in silence, feeling eyes on him from every corner of the office. The elevator ride down felt eternal. When he finally stepped out onto the street, the weight of what he'd lost hit him fully. The promotion was gone. The zenith pitch was gone. His career was likely destroyed. And worst of all, He had proven to himself that he was exactly what he'd always feared being: not good enough, not worthy, not capable of succeeding on his own merits. He walked for hours through Lagos's busy streets, anonymous in the crowds, finally invisible in a way he'd never wanted to be. When he finally made it home to Surulere, he sat on his bed and cried. For the lies he'd told, for the opportunity he'd destroyed, for the person he'd pretended to be, and the person he actually was. The man in the mirror was a stranger, and Chidi didn't know how to introduce himself to his own reflection anymore. News of Chidi's deception spread through the office like wildfire. By the next day, everyone at Sterling Heights knew. His former colleagues' reactions were mixed. Some felt betrayed, others pitied him. A few were angry that he had lied to them personally about his background and his life. But something unexpected happened. Instead of simply firing him and moving on, the story reached beyond the office walls. One person who heard about it was Mrs. Okonkwo, the office's senior cleaning supervisor. She was in her late 50s, a woman who had worked at Sterling Heights for 15 years, someone most of the young executives barely noticed. Mrs. Okonkwo had grown up in Ajegunle, just like Chidi. She had worked her way through life with honesty and hard labor, raising 3 children after her husband died, putting all of them through school on a cleaning supervisor's salary. When she heard that a young man from her own neighborhood had lied his way into the company and was now being investigated, she asked to speak with him. Chidi was surprised when he received the call to meet her at a small buka near the office. He almost didn't go. What was the point? But something in her voice compelled him. "I know where you're from," Mrs. Okonkwo said when they sat down with plates of rice and stew between them. "I know that neighborhood. I know the shame you felt telling these rich children where you really come from. I know the fear that they won't see your worth if they know your background." Chidi looked down at his food, unable to meet her eyes. "But child, let me tell you something. Your background is not your shame, it's your strength. The fact that you came from Ajegunle and still made it to Sterling Heights, even for 6 months, shows more talent and determination than these children who had everything handed to them will ever have. You didn't need to lie. Your truth was powerful enough." "But they wouldn't have hired me if I told the truth," Chidi protested. "Maybe not, or maybe they would have. You'll never know now. But what I do know is this: when you lie about who you are, you cheat yourself out of your own story. And your story, Chidi, the real one, is incredible. A boy from one of Lagos's toughest neighborhoods who put himself through Polytechnic, who has real talent, who worked his way up from selling phone cards to creating marketing campaigns. That story inspires people. That story shows what's possible. Why would you trade that for a false story about privilege that hundreds of other people already have?" Her words cracked something open inside him. For 6 months, he had been running from his truth. For 6 months, he had treated his background like a burden to hide rather than a testament to his resilience. Mrs. Okonkwo continued, "I'm going to speak to Mr. Davidson. I'm going to tell him what I know about you, about where you're from, about what it takes to survive and succeed from that place. I can't promise he'll give you a second chance, but I can promise that your real story deserves to be heard." Over the next week, something remarkable happened. Mrs. Okonkwo wasn't the only one who spoke up. Other staff members, the security guards, the canteen workers, the drivers, People Chidi had barely noticed during his time pretending to be wealthy began sharing their own stories with management. Stories of hardship and perseverance, stories of people who had worked their way up honestly. They formed an unlikely community of support for a young man who had lied, but whose talent they recognized and whose struggle they understood. Even some of Chidi's former colleagues began to reconsider. Tunda, who had initially felt most betrayed, reached out. "I've been thinking about what you said about being ashamed of your background. I grew up with everything handed to me. I never had to fight for anything. Maybe that's why my work is good, but never great. I've never been hungry enough. What you did was wrong, lying to us. But I get why you did it. And honestly, your campaigns were better than any of ours. That came from you, from your real experience, not from your fake background." The community's advocacy didn't excuse Chidi's lies, but it reframed them, helped the company leadership see them not as malicious deception, but as a misguided attempt by a talented young man to overcome barriers he thought were insurmountable. It didn't guarantee him a second chance, but it gave his story a hearing it wouldn't have otherwise received. And sometimes, being heard is the first step toward redemption. 2 weeks after his suspension, Chidi received a call from Sterling Heights. Mr. Davidson wanted to meet. Chidi's hands shook as he dressed that morning, not in borrowed clothes or pretend wealth, but in his own simple but clean outfit. He had nothing left to lose. The truth was already out. In Mr. Davidson's office, the mood was different than their last meeting. Also present were Mrs. Adeyemi, Mrs. Okonkwo, and 2 other senior managers. "Chidi," Mr. Davidson began, "we've had extensive discussions about your situation. What you did was unacceptable. You falsified your credentials and lied repeatedly. Under normal circumstances, that would be grounds for immediate termination and possible legal action." Chidi nodded, accepting this reality. "However," Mr. Davidson continued, "several people have advocated strongly on your behalf. They've shared perspectives we needed to hear. Mrs. Okonkwo has told us about the realities of growing up where you did, about the systemic barriers that make people feel they have to hide their origins to access opportunities. Your colleagues have reminded us that your actual work, the campaigns you created, the clients you secured, was all real talent, not fabrication." He paused, looking at Chidi directly. "We've also had to examine our own role in creating an environment where someone felt they couldn't succeed being their authentic self. If our company culture made you feel that being from Ajegunle was a disqualification, then we have work to do." Mrs. Adeyemi spoke next. "We're not going to restore your promotion. You haven't earned back that level of trust yet. But we're offering you a choice. You can resign with a neutral reference, which will allow you to move forward with your career elsewhere. Or you can return to your original position, at your original salary on a 6-month probation. During that time, you'll need to prove not just your professional capabilities, which we already know are strong, but your integrity. You'll need to rebuild trust. It won't be easy. If you choose to return," Mr. Davidson added, "you'll also be part of a new initiative we're starting. We're creating a mentorship program partnering with polytechnics and universities in underserved communities. We want to create pathways for talented young people from all backgrounds to access opportunities here, without having to lie to get through the door. We'd like you to help shape that program, to share your story so others don't feel they have to make the choices you made." Chidi couldn't speak for a moment. This wasn't forgiveness exactly, The consequences were real, the probation was strict, the trust was broken, but it was something more valuable: a second chance, a chance to prove himself honestly, a chance to turn his mistake into meaning. "I want to stay," Chidi finally said, "and I want to make this right, not just for me, but for everyone who comes after me." The months that followed were the hardest of Chidi's life, but also the most rewarding. He worked with determination, showing up early, staying late, treating every task with the care it deserved. He lived within his means, dressing in his actual clothes, speaking about his actual life. When colleagues asked about his background now, he told the truth about Ajegunle, about his taxi driver father, about his vegetable seller mother, about selling phone cards and studying at night. Something remarkable happened. Instead of looking down on him, his colleagues became fascinated. They asked questions about his neighborhood, his family, his journey. Some admitted they had always felt intimidated by his apparent wealth. Now they found him more relatable. His real story, with all its struggle and determination, inspired more respect than his fabricated story of privilege ever had. The mentorship program launched 6 months later. Chidi stood before a room full of young people from neighborhoods like his, sharing his story: the lies, the shame, the consequences, the redemption. "Don't make my mistake," he told them. "Your background is not your limitation, it's your strength. The obstacles you've overcome, the resilience you've built, the perspective you carry, these are advantages, not disadvantages. Own your truth. It's more powerful than any lie." After his probation ended, Mr. Davidson called him in again. "You've rebuilt our trust, Chidi. You've proven that talent combined with integrity is unstoppable. We're offering you the senior position again. This time, you've truly earned it." Chidi felt tears in his eyes, but they were different tears than before. Not tears of shame or fear, but of gratitude and relief. He had lost everything and found something better: himself. That evening, Chidi went home to Ajegunle. His mother was cooking in their small kitchen. His father was reading the newspaper in their modest living room. They looked up as he entered, and Chidi saw them differently now, not as sources of shame, but as heroes who had given him everything they could. "I got promoted," he told them, "and I want to tell you the whole story. The truth this time. All of it. My brothers and sisters, listen carefully to Chidi's story because it carries truths we all need to hear. Honesty is not just about telling truth, it's about living truth. When Chidi lied about his background, he wasn't just deceiving his employers. He was rejecting himself, his family, his journey. He was saying that who he really was wasn't good enough. But the truth is, our struggles make us who we are. Our challenges build our character. Our obstacles develop our strength. Your background is not your barrier, it's your foundation." Chidi came from Ajegunle, from poverty, from hardship. He saw this as something to hide. But the grit that allowed him to survive that environment, the determination that pushed him through Polytechnic while working 3 jobs, the creativity born from having to make something from nothing, these qualities made him exceptional at his job. When he tried to hide his foundation, he nearly destroyed the building he was trying to construct. Lies grow like weeds, choking the truth until there's no room to breathe. One small lie required 10 more lies to support it. Those lies required 100 more. Soon, Chidi wasn't just lying about his past. He was living a lie in the present, spending money he didn't have, pretending to be someone he wasn't. exhausting himself with performance. Lies don't stay small, they multiply, they spread, they take over. Community sees what individuals miss. When Chidi's lies were exposed, it wasn't the wealthy executives who first understood his story. It was Mrs. Okonkwo, the cleaning supervisor. It was the security guards and the canteen workers. These people recognized his journey because they had walked similar paths. They formed a community of advocacy that gave his story a fair hearing. Never underestimate the power of community to lift up those who fall. Redemption is possible, but it requires truth, work, and time. Chidi's second chance didn't come free. He had to confess fully, work honestly, and rebuild trust slowly. There were no shortcuts to redemption, just as there are no shortcuts to success. But when you do the work, when you show up authentically and work with integrity, transformation is possible. Your truth is your power. When Chidi finally owned his story, all of it, including the parts he had been ashamed of, something shifted. His real story was more compelling, more inspiring, more valuable than his fabricated story ever was. A boy from the slums who made it through talent and determination is more impressive than another privileged child who had success handed to them. Your truth, with all its struggles and imperfections, is powerful. Don't trade it for someone else's fantasy. So before you lie to impress others, before you hide who you really are to fit in, before you trade your authentic self for a borrowed identity, remember, Chidi. Remember that the weight of borrowed dreams will eventually crush you. Remember that the truth, though it may seem harder to carry at first, will ultimately set you free.
Now it's your turn. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about how we treat each other in our communities, then I need you to do 3 things right now. First, smash that like button. Let me know this story resonated with you. Your likes tell me to bring you more powerful African moral stories like this one. Second, drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever witnessed greed destroy someone? Or have you seen someone genuinely change for the better? Share your story. I read every single comment, and your stories inspire our community. Third, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I post authentic African stories with powerful life lessons every week. Don't miss out on the next tale that could change how you see the world. Bonus: share this video with one person who needs to hear this message today. We all know someone who could benefit from Kunle's lesson about greed and redemption. Remember, the earth is always watching, always balancing her accounts. Live honestly, serve genuinely, and prosperity will follow not from what you take, but from what you give. Until the next story, stay blessed, stay balanced, and keep our African wisdom alive. Subscribe now and join our family of story lovers.